Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's pre-recorded session. We are going to focus on primarily today on Learning Unit 3 and Theme 1 and 2. According to our pacer, I think we are on track. On the 22nd of August, we will be doing Learning Unit Theme 1 and 2 and so forth. So just to kick off today's session, sort of from an agenda perspective, we are going to be focusing on process design, as well as process performance, the different types, strategies that's used in manufacturing, as well as within the service sector, and then industrial engineering as a whole. Right, so let's kick off. So firstly, from a process perspective, we ask ourselves the question of what is a process? And the textbook definition is it's a method that will be utilized on a continuous basis, which will result in either creation of a good or a service that can be delivered to a customer at a profit. If you really think about process and process design, it basically is a series of actions as well as steps that's taken in our everyday life that helps us to achieve a specific goal or a specific outcome. We follow a process on a daily basis. So for instance, a process like when we wake up in the morning, do we dress our bed first? Do we go out and go into our bathroom? Do we brush our teeth? Do we have a shower? Then have a cup of coffee, then have breakfast before we actually leave the house in the morning. So all of that is a process. A lot of times we stick to the process because we follow a certain norm in order for us to then achieve that goal or that strategy or objective at the end of the day. So during the design phase of the process, there is two aims. The first one is we need to get the most amount of value that the good or the service will be able to create. And then the cost that's added to the good or the service during the creation must be minimized. So keep cost as low as possible and the actual process to give you as much value as possible. So to share another example, like a process of doing your laundry. Okay, so when you wash your clothes, you basically follow a very specific sequence of steps, which is seen as your process. So you sort your clothes, you sort it out in terms of what is your whites, what is your colors, what is your delicate fabrics, etc. Then you load your washing machine and you place it into your different sort of groups into the washing machine itself. You add a detergent, you add a fabric softener, whatever your liking or that specific process for yourself is. And then you start the washing cycle, basically. You select the appropriate time. Maybe there's a temperature setting for that specific type of clothing that you have. If it's white, maybe you're adding some, Jik or whatever it is, whatever different detergents, suits or floats your boat. That's basically what you would use. When the washing process is done, you're then unloading the machine. You're removing all of your clean clothes from it. And then you continue the process until all of your laundry is done. After you've done every group of clothing that you've now separated, that is a routine and that is a process. And it becomes, very consistent in terms of a pattern. And each step within the process is critical and it contributes to what that outcome is of you having clean clothes. And that's basically a process. In your everyday life and every situation that you fall into, there is a process that's involved. And within that process, there's methodology that goes into it. And there's various steps that need to be followed in order for your process to be completed, to have or to achieve an end result. Then we go on to characteristics of a process. So what features as part of the process? So the nature of a process basically refers to its characteristics and how it functions within a specific organization to achieve specific goals. So some of the characteristics is sequential flow. So a process follows different sequence of different steps And every step sort of builds on a previous step. So you want to form a very logical progression or marginal improvement towards achieving what your outcome is. So the sequence basically ensures that your inputs are then transformed into outputs. So I hope you're seeing the correlation in various learning units as we're going along, how one then contributes to another. Then we have repeatability. So a lot of the processes are typically repeated, meaning that they are performed in the same or a similar sort of manner every single time to produce consistent results. So you want marginal improvement, you want consistency in your process flow, therefore you have sort of repeatability with it. So with the consistency, it helps from an efficiency perspective and quality control, especially if you're in a manufacturing environment. Then we have an input-output structure. So the process obviously takes inputs, which is your raw materials, data, labor, anything that contributes from a beginning process. And it's then transformed into an output like a good or a service or even information. So the transformation process will involve any physical changes like manufacturing or procedural changes like a service delivery, whatever entails, having a final product as part of an output. Any defined roles and responsibilities. So every process that typically exists, you have specific tasks that is assigned to different role players or stakeholders within an organization, and their roles and responsibilities is clearly sort of defined. And then the organization then gives accountability or clarity to every role player or stakeholder, which is now part of the process. So it's like having a job. If you work in an operational setting, for instance, you have a zone controller who says something to a driver to do a collection in place A. All of that is a process, and the process is then followed, and everybody understands what their roles and responsibilities are within that specific process. Goal orientated. So a lot of times the processes are designed with a specific objective or a specific goal at the end. So whether it's you delivering a product, whether you're completing a service, whether you're a salesperson that needs to maintain a target, every process is aligned with the bigger goal of what a business sets out, which contributes to the business success. Like for instance, in a logistics environment, from an operational perspective, you follow a process and your KPI is to maintain 100% on-time delivery as per your SLA. If you're in a commercial setting like a salesperson, your responsibility is to maintain 100% of your sales target, which contributes to the revenue of the business. If you're sitting in a management perspective, your role and responsibility is to reduce costs by, let's say, 5 to 10%, increase revenue by 20%, whatever that goal is at the end of the day, that's what you need to be aligned with. Efficiency and optimization. So one of the key motives of defining or even refining a specific process is to make it as efficient as possible. Whether it's removing any waste within the business, whether it's reducing defects or errors, or whether it's just making sure that you are optimizing the current resources that you have to have the best possible output with the least possible input, because we all know that there's a big cost when you have more input as opposed to output. So efficiency and optimization being two key characteristics from a process perspective. Then we have standardization and control. So a lot of times processes are standardized, meaning that there's specific methods or specific procedures that needs to be followed in order for there to be consistency within an organization. So it means that it's very important for a lot of businesses to adhere to the sort of benchmarks that's set. The benchmarks does help from a standardization as well as a control perspective. You're able to maintain and we're able to maintain KPIs, and you're also able to measure what those KPIs are. Flexibility. So a lot of time processes are designed to be consistent, but with consistency, there also needs to be flexibility, which is very important, especially in the day and age that we are sitting at right now. Nobody expected COVID to hit, and we needed flexibility in every process or every supply chain possible. So there has to be a change or a need for flexibility within a sort of process flow. And it allows for you to improve continuously, innovate, and also when there's new benchmarks and technologies from a global standard that's introduced, you're able to use this and initiate it within your process without making drastic changes. And then feedback loop, which is basically, putting in sort of mechanisms in your process that allows for feedback, allows for customer evaluation, or any sort of adjustment. Like for instance, in a manufacturing industry, you've got different quality control checkpoints that is built into a specific process so that you're able to identify when a product is defective as early as possible. Whereas in a service process perspective, customer feedback is then used to improve service delivery. So understanding where you're sitting from a feedback loop perspective and how does it then benefit your business either from a manufacturing perspective or a service perspective. And then interconnectedness, which is basically processes don't operate in isolation. They operate in a position where everything is interconnected. The output of one process serves as an input for another process. I don't think there is any business that is not interconnected at every stakeholder level. And the interconnection basically highlights the need for having integration across different areas of an organization. So operations speaks to finance, finance speaks to sales, sales speaks to leadership or management, customer services then speaks to operations or manufacturing. So there's different elements of the business that all need to talk to each other in order for the process to work and the processes to be interconnected. Okay. Okay, then we go on to the different sort of methods to measure performance itself. So from a measurement perspective, analyzing the performance of a specific process is very important so that you know that the process is efficient, it's effective, there's good quality there, and you can change it when you need to change it so that your business operation is successful at the end of the day. So how do we now measure your process itself? So the first one is, and I speak about it a lot because it's something that's very important, it's how we measure individuals, stakeholders, at any point in any business is KPIs, so key performance indicators. And KPIs is basically, it's science, it's specific, it can be quantified, and it's used to basically evaluate the success of a process in meeting what the objectives are that was set for that particular process. A lot of times the KPIs that are set is aligned with what the business goals are, what the objectives are, and you're able to measure it from an efficiency as well as a cost perspective. So from a KPI side, there's a lot of things that you need to take into account. Some of it being you have a targeted measurement, meaning that you're focusing on specific areas that need to be focused on or that's important to the business or important to that specific process. It's very data driven, which means that it can be tracked over time with the relevant data that you now put in. And it aligns obviously with your objectives. The second one is a balanced scorecard. So the balanced scorecard is basically strategically planning and measuring from a management tool perspective. So it views the performance from 4 different perspectives, basically. So the first one is financially. So anything from a cost and a profit side, that's what they would measure the process on. From a customer matrix perspective, based on has the customer been satisfied with both your product or your service, as well as what is the retention rate, meaning if you've got 100 customers in August of 2024, you have 100 customers of 2025 of the same customer. So you are retaining all of those customers. Anything new obviously becomes a bonus, but retention rates is very important. Internal process metric, which involves anything from an efficiency perspective with internal operations or internal manufacturing. And then learning and growth. So anything from skills, training, development, anything that has to do with your employees, that's how you would then, measure it from a balanced scorecard perspective. And that's how you would then measure those specific processes. So a lot of what I'm talking to you today on, especially like these 5 points, for instance, it may not necessarily be in your textbook, but it's very important information to understand purely because this is something that you would carry into the workplace. This is something that would, benefit you as you grow and, climb that corporate ladder. A lot of these concepts is used in business from a leadership perspective, and it's how we would measure processes in the job sector. Then we have Lean Six Sigma or Lean Matrix, and it's used from a process performance perspective with how do we reduce waste and how do we now improve efficiency. So you'll see a lot of the times the keywords here is efficiency. Every business wants to be as efficient as possible, meaning the least amount of inputs to get the most amount of outputs. Anything that can save you from a cost perspective and improve your profitability is how we're going to measure our processes. And some of the Lean Six Sigma sort of principles is, value stream mapping, which is basically a tool that we use to visualize the flow of materials throughout even information throughout your sort of manufacturing process. So from an input to transformation to an output perspective, how do we now visualize this flow? Anything from a lead time, so the total time that's taken from the beginning of a process right down to the delivery to a final customer. What is the time frame there? And what is the process of improvement in order for us to reduce that lead time? And then overall effectiveness from an equipment perspective, especially from a manufacturing side, how effective is our operations considering the equipment that we use or the machinery that we use, what is available, what is the performance of it, what is the quality, etc. Then we have process benchmarking, which is comparing a process's performance with what the industry standard is, or best practices from other organizations, whether it is something that's from a local side or from a global perspective. And the goal here is to identify or to do a gap analysis from a performance side, and then understand where the areas for improvement is that you can learn from your organization perspective. So a lot of time you have two sort of benchmarking. Number one is competitive benchmarking, where you are comparing the performance of yourself against a direct competitor. Sometimes this information is readily available. Sometimes it's not readily available. But as we go through the learning units 3 and 4, you identify different types of methods that can be quantitative and qualitative that help you do a lot of research to understand how benchmarking can be done. Functional benchmarking, which you are comparing it with organizations or businesses that have very similar functions or very similar processes to your business, despite them being in a different industry. So they may not be your competitor, but the process that they are following may be something that you can actually follow. So I was watching a video not too long ago. And from a leadership perspective, when you sit in these management meetings and like exco scenarios, etc., it's always becomes a show and tell. Okay. So if I'm called up, I'm expected to do a presentation. I would stand in front of a boardroom. I would then present what my findings are on a specific topic or a specific process. Or even if it's results driven, what has been my results? What have I done differently? What can I now do better? So these are sort of the presentations that that from a management perspective, you'd be expected to present. Taking that into account, it becomes very much a show and tell scenario. And a lot of people switch off when this happens because a lot of times it's information that is readily shared with business that is just basically vomited out in a presentation in front of a board. And I was watching this video about, and I think it was Jeff Bezos that was talking based on Amazon. And we all know Amazon is a very successful business. And the one thing that Amazon does not do at all is they don't do PowerPoint presentations. So what they do is they build an actual memo. The memo may be 5 to 6 pages long. There is no bullet points at all. So you'll see how this presentation is. So how presentations are supposed to be done is you put keywords there because you can't exactly put sentences and sentences and sentences of stuff. So they are highlighting, presentations are highlighting keywords, whereas a memo is like an essay. You've got an intro, you've got a body, you've got a conclusion, you've got every single point in full sentences using verbs, nouns, pronouns, anything that you can possibly think of is in this memo. And what they do is they hand this memo out at the beginning of this meeting, and the members or the board members are given basically 30 minutes to read through the memo, and then a discussion then takes place after. So it's understanding the different processes. So where I was going with this is understanding different processes from different businesses that is not necessarily in your industry or is your competitor, but you can adopt the process in order for it to work for you. So I've taken this and I'm now using this sort of scenario. Because if I sit up there and I do a presentation, nobody actually, wants to pay attention because it's information that they know, and it's me just talking. That's not what we want to do. We want to create a discussion, an open playing field for everybody to come and give us their opinions, their ideas, what is the innovation that's going through their minds. And I think this sort of example is the perfect example for something that is more functional benchmarking that you can use and adopt that can possibly work within your business. Okay, the next one is process mapping and analysis. And process mapping is creating a visual representation of a process. So either you're using flow charts, diagrams, pie charts, a whiteboard paper, and you're analyzing it into different steps, your inputs, your outputs, what's your inefficiencies, and it's very qualitative, meaning that you'll be able to provide the insight of what goes into a process and how the process then operates. And those are basically your various methods of how you can showcase a specific process. Okay. The next one is the different types of process structures that falls within a manufacturing setting. And I think when we're looking at it from a manufacturing perspective, we need to understand different processes that follow in, it's more from a product-focused environment where they're focusing more on routing every single piece of work through the operation process. And it's very different to where the service industry sort of sits. And the first one is job process, which is a process-focused process. and it's very adaptable. The scale of operations in this type of process is pretty small, and it's very structured around particular events. So what happens is the result is that the process produces a diversity of products in very small quantities, or it's very customized products. And obviously the quantities are pretty small when it is customized. And the equipment used within the process is more of a general nature, and very little specialized machinery and labor are used for it. For instance, if a customer order for a particular type of lounge suite, like let's say Joshua Door, for instance, will be completed before the order for lounge suites for another business then commences. So it's understanding what that job process is and focusing on that specific process. Batch process is the standardized job shop process, which is pretty commonly used, especially within the manufacturing industry. So batch process makes use of either you have small quantities or large quantities or batches or whatever you want to call it. And it also produces, every batch produced by the process is completed in its entirety before the production for the next batch commences. So you're producing it in batches as and when you do get those specific orders. Line process is a repetitive process, or assembly line process. It's like, for instance, the manufacturing of motor vehicles like Toyota, where you have various standardized parts, you have various components. So the process is very structured around a specific product. Someone will fit in the front wheels of a car, and that person for that specific operation performs that function for an entire shift and is not allowed to go and go into a different operation on the same shift. So that's exactly what it is. It's an assembly line process, or assembly line production process. And then continuous flow, meaning that it's a very product focused process. Like for instance, SAB, if you take that for example, so different beer types like your Castle, your Black Label. So the production volume in this is pretty high. It doesn't change. You're now producing massive amount of volume at a continuous basis. You can operate multiple shifts or 8-hour, 3 shifts, whatever that shift change is. And product changes are then scheduled after every shift, but it becomes a continuous flow in a particular shift. So that basically just speaks on the type of process structures for manufacturing. The next one speaks on the strategies for manufacturing process. So you'll come across this a lot, especially from a supply chain perspective. And it's very nice to understand the 3 concepts or the 3 strategies that is mentioned here from a manufacturing side, because this will help you in the beginning to understand where your customer or even your business is sitting at from a supply chain perspective. So a lot of times you can then identify your lead time, your delivery time, your expected ETA on a specific product if you understand what strategies the business actually uses. So the first one is make to order, which means it's a manufacture to order strategy. And it's normally used where you have a low volume customer specific products that need to be produced. So it's very much job or batch-based production process, and it's not something that's continuous. You have a very high level of customization for this specific product, and it has a high degree of flexibility as well. So anything that a customer would change in a specific item within that supply chain, it can be flexible and it can be moved to what the customer requires. So like for instance, building of a made to order or make to build building, for instance, if you purchase land and you now need to structure the land, and you now sit with an architect and you plan the scenario on what your build is going to be. So that would be like a make to order example. Assemble to order. So it basically makes use of small amount of components to produce a wide range of different products. So there's an assembly process. Obviously, it commences after an order is received from a customer. And the requirement is that the final product is delivered in the shortest possible time. And a lot of times, a typical example here would be like a paint shop. The paint shop will stock inventories of the most basic colors of paint. I walk into the paint shop and I say, I want a lilac color paint. So there's now a color chart that they would use, which says that they need to mix um, two different sort of primary colors to give me the color that I want, because they don't actually have that in stock in the paint shop. And the final product is not, or that color on the color chart is not kept in the inventory. So which means they have to have the recipe to assemble or to make that specific product for me based on other primary colors that is now in stock or available within the inventory level. Then we have make to stock, which is large inventory of products that is available based on customer orders. So a lot of it is based on forecasted orders. So what the customer is forecasting their specific demand to be on that particular product. There's just a whole array of continuous flow of manufacturing that then occurs. So a lot of times a business can satisfy a large number of customer orders in the shortest possible lead time. The product is very standard. There's absolutely no customization in the product at all. And it's used mainly from a FMCG perspective, meaning a fast-moving consumer goods side. So groceries, etc., where your volumes of groceries that were sold, then you speak to what your demand forecast is. It goes into production to satisfy what your future customer needs are going to be. And the demand for this can be very predictable. It's not something that's non or unpredictable. It's always pretty consistent from a forecasting side. Okay, so this is strategies in manufacturing. So the next one is types of process structures from a service side. So the first one is you obviously want to be able to design the correct process for the service industry. And it's no less important to what the manufacturing side is. And the same care that we take from a manufacturing side needs to be taken from a service perspective. And there's three different types, which is professional service process. And it's typically giving a great variety or a wide variety of services with low volumes. The customers basically involved in this type of process will, for over a period of time to plan or design. The process is very highly customized, so not standardized at all. Every stakeholder is part of it. The employees in the process have a lot of freedom of choice, in the way the customer is handled in the system, and the process can be classified as being focused on people rather than equipment. Like, for instance, a doctor's surgery, a law firm, an attorney's office, dentist surgery. So anything from a professional service perspective, even if it's a hospital, for instance, all of this will fall part of this process. Second one is our service shop process, which falls somewhere between professional service and mass service, so sort of the in-between. It's got a degree of customer participation in the process, as with your professional process, and also a high degree of adaptation, meaning that the process has a high volume of customers, and there's a fair amount of interaction with these customers that is present. Like, for instance, your banking, so your standard banks, your ABSAs, your net banks, etc. Members of the front office such as your tellers, your receptionists, your personal bankers. They carry out particular duties. Your back staff, like investment bankers, personal bankers, they carry out other duties. So front office, maybe minimum training, back office, maybe more experience, more training that's required if you need like a loan application or depositing and withdrawing money. So that's sort of the difference between service shop and then professional service process. Banking wouldn't fall into professional service, but more from a personal service shop process perspective. Mass service is basically a process where you have a large number of client dealings. There's a very little scope for having a customized service. Um, the front sort of office staff have very little leeway in which they deal with customers. Um, and they have very clear defined roles and responsibilities within the process that they need to then follow, and they're not allowed to deviate from what their standard processes are. So like for instance, if you walk into a retailer like a Pick and Pay, Checkers, Spar, it's your people at front, your front office staff that sit there, your till operators, the people that pack your groceries away, the cleaners, etc. So sort of that's where the different processes then fall into place from a service industry side. Okay, and then we have industrial engineering. So it's more so the difference between where process sits in and where industrial engineering sits in. The thing with both in process and industrial engineering is it's both focused on efficiency within the business. And I think everything that we spoke about today focuses on efficiency. How do we get the most amount of productivity, either from a staff perspective or from a manufacturing process perspective, and quality within our operations. So process engineering, basically focusing on designing and optimizing, and controlling specific processes, especially those that's involved within the production or the transformation process. And basically, it deals with the flow and transformation of material and energy. Whereas industrial engineering is more broader and involves optimizing entire systems and processes within an organization to improve overall productivity, quality, and efficiency, looking mainly at supply chains, ergonomics, human factors, those sort of things. And industrial engineering involves various aspects within the business, like logistics, labor, management, technology. How do we now integrate all of this within the workforce and within stakeholders? So that basically speaks on both those processes to give you more of an understanding of industrial energy. I think if I'm an industrial engineering perspective, it's always nice to look at it from a ergonomic side. Whereas process engineering, it's more specifically dealing with different processes. Industrial is more from an overall process perspective or overall business process perspective. And I think that is the end of our learning unit 3, theme 1 and 2 for today. On the 22nd of August, we will be doing our learning unit 4. I think it's theme 1 and 2, and that focuses on forecasting. So you'll see a little bit of mix and match between process design and forecasting. Got some nice examples and stuff like that we could work on or talk about, really. But yeah, other than that, everybody have a lovely day, and we will chat on the 22nd. Thank you.